This is the New York City FC Pregame Live. Tonight, New York City FC look to move on in the U.S. Open Cup as they play FC Cincinnati. And now, here are your hosts, Glenn Crooks and Joe Tolleson.
Yeah, and we're here from two key. Welcome, everybody. I'm Glenn Crooks, along with a very familiar face and certainly a familiar voice, Joe Tolleson, who will join me on the commentary tonight with airtime 6:45 Eastern for the pregame show. Kickoff 7:03. You will sync the video and the audio so that you can hear our hometown commentary. But for now, we're talking about the U.S. Open Cup. Joe, it's pretty interesting because, as always in these competitions, coaches choose to roll over the roster a little bit, the rotation that they talk about. And that's certainly at least a bit of the case tonight for Nick Cushing and New York City FC, and maybe to a lesser extent for FC Cincinnati. We should start right off by saying Cincinnati does not have a game this weekend. New York City has the Hudson River Derby on Saturday, and an intense affair. So Nick Cushing and his staff, they have to consider that at least somewhat.
Well, and it was evident when we got on the plane to fly out here yesterday, because Keaton Parks wasn't on the plane.
Right.
Luis Barraza wasn't on the plane. So they've made some decisions. Yeah, Santi Rodriguez is here. He's not in the starting lineup. Gabriel Pereira is here. He's not in the starting lineup. There are 4 of the 14 goals scored by New York City this year in the starting lineup, and it is 3 by Tyler Magno and 1 by Maxime Chenot. And Maxime Chenot is the only player in the starting lineup tonight who has scored a goal in a U.S. Open Cup match. So, but what the Cup does, and it's the case around the world, this gives Nick Cushing an opportunity in a way, and Pat Noonan on the other side for FC Cincinnati, to reward some players for everything they've contributed up to this point of the season. Matt Freese, for example, will be in goal because this is a guy who comes in day after day in training, does what he's supposed to do. A lot of time the backup keeper gets overlooked as being an integral part of the team, but they are an integral part of the team twofold. One, because they are there the day in and the day out. When they do scrimmages, they're one of the guys in goal. They're working on their communication with everybody. But also, if something should happen to Luis Barraza at some point in the season, Matt Freese is the guy you count on to go and do something. So it's an opportunity, gets them some meaningful playing time. You as a coach know, Glenn, you can train all you want, 100 hours a week. If that were the case, out of the 168, there is no substitute for actual match competition.
No, and Freese is 24 years old. He was acquired from the Philadelphia Union, $750,000 in GAM. So
and folks, but I know they throw around the allocation money. People, kind of what is it? One of my favorite things, once somebody said it was an MLS thing, dress up as your favorite MLS thing for Halloween. And somebody said, if you're not into Halloween, dress however you want. Just tell people your allocation money. Nobody knows what it is anyway. But trust us when we tell you, $750,000 in allocation money is a lot of allocation money to bring in a backup keeper who maybe at the time of the acquisition was thought he might be the starter.
Well, I think the feeling amongst those who were looking from the outside in is that Freese was brought in to be the number 1. But Rob Vertoogian has been a proponent of Luis Barraza, even though he was sitting behind Sean Johnson since 2018 when he was drafted out of Marquette University. And Freese, they know he's good. They know that he had to get an opportunity. So a little over 2 weeks ago, I brought it up to Nick Cushing, part of our pregame show, about Matt Freese, this backup, who is certainly someone capable of being the number 1. And one would assume that Matt Freese will, at the very least, get his opportunity in the U.S. Open Cup.
Yeah, he will play. He will play in that tournament. He will play. Even if we decide he doesn't play in the Open Cup, he'll definitely play in the Leagues Cup. I don't foresee the season where Matt Freese doesn't play any games. One, because he's a top goalkeeper. 2, because he came here to play games, and 3, because his attitude and his application deserves games. So we're discussing it already between me and my staff and Rob, is how do we get this guy games? He needs games, and if we could move the Open Cup to this week, we would do it right now, because we want this guy to get in the team and feel the team, because he's given so much to the team that we need to pay back now.
So that's Nick Cushing talking about Nick Freese a couple of weeks back. And indeed, Freese, as you can see in the lower third, if you're watching and can see the scroll, will be starting in goal, making his first appearance for New York City FC. Luis Barraza has started all 11 of the previous matches, all regular season matches for New York City FC, and they've been very happy with him. But, yeah, you need 2 good keepers. It's nice to have 3, but you need to have 2 good keepers, because inevitably – something could happen to your number 1. Brad Guzan goes down with an Achilles. There are a number of things that can happen to a goalkeeper because they're involved in collisions, not with just other players, but the post. It happens.
Well, and if something were to happen tonight, it's going to be Cody Mizell, who is the guy who deputizes right now. He's the guy on the bench for New York City. But it's interesting because I'm surprised a little bit. But again, it's that opportunity for coaches to reward players of who Pat Noonan is and isn't starting. We don't expect to see Brenner at all. He was involved in a collision, had a scan. We were just told everything came out. He was cleared, wasn't hurt at all, but from their last game against DC United. But he is not even going to be on the bench tonight. But we are going to see Brandon Vasquez, who is a player that could have been hit or miss of whether or not we actually see him. The guy who's going to be on the bench, but we could see him feature at some point, is Luciano Acosta, who a lot of the reason that FC Cincinnati is where they are in the table, the reason they are unbeaten at home this season in MLS, is the play of Luciano Acosta. He really is the guy that makes everything click. But he's going to start on the bench tonight, and it's going to be an opportunity for Yuya Kubo, who was another one of those players that a lot was expected when he first came over from Japan last year.
Yep, and Brenner, but it's very interesting how it's being handled, and I think this is such a credit to Pat Noonan and his staff. And one of the reasons Cincinnati has been successful was Noonan's arrival after leaving Philadelphia as the top assistant to Jim Curtin. But Brenner is already on his way out the door. The transfer is complete, but he's not leaving until July to go to Udinese in Serie A. Yet he's still playing, he's training. They've done it on good terms. It really reminds me in college where at times you'll have somebody after a fall semester transfer, and then is the relationship strong enough where you can invite that player in to train with your team, during the spring season, so they're ready for their transfer. And I'll have to say, in my experience, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It just depended on if there was contention involved. And obviously here, this has been handled so well. Cincinnati playing host to New York City FC in the U.S. Open Cup. It's the first time they've ever met in the Cup, but they've met 8 previous times, 6 New York City wins, and a couple of draws. Cincinnati has never beaten New York City FC, and there were some very difficult moments for Cincinnati in the early stages of all this. But the 2 draws came last year as Cincinnati has continued to move forward.
Yeah, and you talk about some of the things that have been very interesting. Just because of the way it all happened, one of my favorite, when people say, what's one of your favorite New York City games? It really has nothing to do with the game, the impact, whatever. But one of them is a game that they won against FC Cincinnati 5-2. And people say, well, what was so unique about that? I said, because New York City scored all 7 goals, because it was 2 own goals were how FC Cincinnati got on the scoreboard. And it's just one of those games you remember.
It was Sebastian Ibeaga and Eber. And Eber had scored, but Eber had a brace on the other side. So everybody said Eber had a hat trick that night.
That was it. And it all balanced out. But it was a 5-2 game. So it's just one of those interesting ones. But this, it's taken a year. For sure. And Chris Albright, who also came over from Philly, and Pat Noonan, they have kind of dipped back into what they know, and that is Philadelphia players. And that's Sergio Santos, one of those players who has come in, who you expect to do a lot for this team, Ray Gaddis, Alvis Powell. So they said, hey, here's some guys at Philly that maybe aren't going to feature long-term for Philadelphia, that can help us as a young team. They're a veteran presence that can help some of our younger players and it's one of those phrases I heard when I was younger, and it took me a while to wrap my head around it. But there were coaches that I heard say they need to learn how to become a professional. And it was more about taking an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, and all of a sudden, this is your job. This is what your responsibility is for 12 months a year, is your contribution to your club. And it can't just be, well, hey, there's no countdown to summer vacation. Once you get into these ranks. And I think it's part of learning that whole thing. So it was an interesting concept, but those are the kind of guys, Gaddis, Powell, Santos, some others, who can teach some of these young players how to be a professional.
You see the starting 11, Joe, and New York City is invariably, from the personnel that are in the lineup, going to play a 3-4-3, so 3 at the back for Nick Cushing. And part of that is Tony Alfaro. So he's making his first appearance for New York City FC since acquired from DC United. His last game played, Joe, his last competitive game, October the 9th, 2022, when DC United hosted this same FC Cincinnati team, and Cincinnati thrashed DCU 5-2. Tony put a 90-minute shift in at left central defense. He'll be left central in a 3-back tonight with Chanot in the middle, we figure, and Martins on the right. And the other guy who is starting is Siegel.
Right.
And he had the opportunity he started in 3 consecutive matches as New York City and Nick Cushing were trying to figure out this number 9, which Tolleson Magno maybe didn't serve it quite the way that they had hoped, and more comfortable on the wing for Magno. So in comes Siegel, and he got 2 shots on goal in his 3 games. Both of them were well taken and had opportunities, but maybe didn't contribute enough there. So his last start was April the 15th against Nashville. It was a 2-1 win. Has not played in the last 3 matches, as New York City has been experimenting with a false 9, which has looked positive at times, and then other times only 1 shot on goal 2 matches ago from it.
Yeah, so Tolleson Magno, I like Tolleson Magno. I like Tolleson Magno in a role where he can show his creativity. And I don't think that's at the number 9, especially when you have a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-3 where you have those wingers helping. But at times, that number 9, you can argue at times it's really more like a 4-3-2-1 or a 4-2-3-1, depending on how those midfielders play out. And what you need from that number 9, and what they really weren't getting, I don't feel, from Tolleson Magno, was a guy who would stay in the 18. He would drift too much, come back too much, and then all of a sudden, and what New York City likes to do is, can you create the turnover? Can you do something on the counterattack? And, to come through and create that turnover. Now nobody's in the 18, and you're trying to play catch up a little bit there. So it'll be, I like Magno out on that left-hand side. And again, we talked about opportunities for players in a match like this, a way to reward players for what they've done for the club throughout the season in the U.S. Open Cup. And to me, that's an opportunity here for Siegel, because Gabriel Siegel, has, as you said, has been close. He's had a couple of shots. He's taken them well, but is this the kind of game that if he breaks through with a goal, maybe 2, fingers crossed, does that kind of jumpstart him down
I
the
think
season?
so, and I think that's what he needs. That's what the club needs, and it provides a variety of ways that you can go at it against an opponent. So if the false 9 now has been trained,
right.
And we should point out that 2 players, Keaton Parks, Joe mentioned, was left home, not because of injury, just he's had a lot of minutes, and why travel if you're not going to play? And
Red Bulls is coming up.
And Mitja Ilinic and Matthias Pellegrini made the trip, but they're not in the squad, and they've been rehabbing here because they have slight injuries, and hoping to have them ready for the weekend. So Tavon Gray, he starts the last match at Charlotte and plays 16 minutes and goes out with a soft tissue injury, undefined, so we're not quite sure. His previous start was March 25th. Ilinic had essentially won the job as far as we could observe. It's never been stated by anybody within the club. but Ilinic was getting the most minutes, was getting the most starts. So
Walks
Gray,
like a duck, talks like a duck.
This
right?
is big for Well, it's big for Gray tonight because he's a guy that he's got to figure out the injuries because that's held him back. And right now, he's probably number 2 on the right side at the back.
Right. Well, because Micha Ilinic is going to give you the one thing that Tavon Gray is still working on, and that is that contribution on the offensive end of the field. Tavon Gray is a fantastic defender. I'm not going to ever take that away from him. For sure, he can defend. And at times, if they play 3 in the back, it wouldn't surprise me if you see him as one of those center backs in a 3 center back lineup. And again, to have the opportunity to have Ilinic do what he can do on that right-hand side. But it'll be Tavon Gray, Kevin O'Toole back in the starting lineup tonight.
That's right.
And with Keaton Parks at home, Alfredo Morales will partner with James Sands in the midfield.
All right, so New York City on the road, Joe, no wins in 6 matches. So we're going to talk about all competitions. We got the U.S. Open Cup match.
NFC Cincinnati at home, no losses.
7-0 in all competitions, and every one of the 7 games that they've won was by a single goal. They were all either 1-0 or 2-1 games, all their 7 wins here. And New York City hasn't won on the road. So it's interesting, Joe. 2 points from 6 matches in regular play, 4 goals from 6 matches. 2 of them came at Charlotte. So finally, matching their total from the previous 5 road games. So Nick Cushing was addressed this week about road mentality and then some of the issues on set-piece defense.
The toughness or the mentality that you require to win a game on the road, we 100% have. We just had a game where we carry the whole game. We dictate the game from start to end. With a team that's really trying to push, with a team that really, really showed our identity. And I know Christian well, and I know the way that Charlotte wants to play, and that's not, putting it up the field and playing long. And although that caused us problems, I thought we played really, really well. We have an area in the game that we have to improve. And I've said before, it's not a positive, but there is a small positive in being able to shine a light exactly in the area where you need to improve. We've conceded 14 goals this year, 50% of them from set play.
That's not good. 7 goals conceded out of the 14. Just 7 goals conceded off of set pieces. I'm telling you, for an entire season is not good. We're talking about...
And right now it's 50%.
So it's unfortunate, and there's been a lot of discussion about how the setup is. So we'll look closely at that again tonight because that it's an issue. Everyone on the club knows it's an issue. The players who have to defend either the corner kicks or the free kicks are acutely aware of what's happened. So I'm not sure how it's been addressed in training. I know how I would handle it.
Well, I was going to say,
it's like, why would you work on why would you work on anything else? You do have to punish might be the wrong word. And I understand modern coaching and how you're supposed to go about it. But there's times, man, where you got to get in there, crawl. And that may well be happening, but it's many of these goals have been inexcusable.
Well, but I was going to say, you as a coach, when you like take Charlotte last week, on the set piece goals there, at times it doesn't look from a tactical standpoint as though it's a poor setup, that they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to set up on that set piece defending, but sometimes it's just the opponent was hungrier to get to the ball.
Well, that could be, or there's indecision, and this has been the claim from Nick, because Robert Tugian sets up the attack and the defense on set pieces. On set pieces, and quarter kicks in particular, New York City elects to zonal mark. Right. They do have some man markers, but in essence, it's a majority zone. So when the ball is played in your area, you attack the ball. But what had happened last week, Capetti, the goal he scored, and he's the best player in the air, attacking-wise, for Charlotte. In that moment, he went unmarked. No one gave him a bump. No one really leapt high enough to give him any sort of issue.
Players missed the ball.
So you look at that and you say, well, you've got to be aware of that guy, and someone has to mark him. Someone has to pick him up. He's the guy that's going to score a goal off of that, which he did. So those are the things, and we know we know how detail-oriented the New York City coaching staff is. So I'm sure they're losing sleep over it because they've got it covered. And you may well be right, Joe. It might ultimately lend itself to the word mentality more than anything else, because defending, you have to have an appetite to defend, whether it's in the run of play or on a set piece. A set piece maybe in particular. And if that appetite is lacking at all, or if there's indecision or some sort of tentative play, which is, I think, part of what's happened, then that's when there could be issues.
Well, you talk to certain guys, and they'll tell you, what made you such a good defender. Well, my mission every minute I was on the field was to not let that guy get by me, to not let him beat me. And sometimes, I know it really makes it a simplistic view, but sometimes that's what it takes. Make sure that, I'm there before my opponent. If I can get to the ball first, I get to the ball before them. There were times like one of the goals last week, Thiago Martins, he goes up for it, but he just misses it. He doesn't get to the ball. It goes through, and Charlotte scores. So it's plays like that I can understand Nick Cushing and Rob Vertugi and Mehdi Bellucci and the rest of the staff being really frustrated, because it is a game, and another cliche, it's a game of inches. If he's up an inch or two higher, a split second sooner, he gets a head on the ball, and it never goes through.
So the other head ball was Richie Ledesma leaping as high as he could, then it just glancing off the top of his head, and that was the own goal, which turned out to be the game-winning goal on a set piece. And the point Matty Lawrence made, which Nick has made to us, is it's the act of committing the foul in the danger zone, not just the defending of the set piece itself, because that's a very difficult angle. Anything can happen. You can't just blame Lorenza. He was trying to defend it. But the foul was committed in this danger zone, and that's another aspect of New York City's discipline, is they've got to stop fouling teams in those areas when you've proven that this season, at this moment, you're not particularly strong in defending the set piece.
Right.
So that's what I got to say.
Well, I mean, it's a guy I work with. I said, the defender. He goes, it's not always the defender's fault. He goes, sometimes it's the mistake the midfielder made upfield that put the defender in a bad position.
Yeah.
So,
and it could have started way. Yeah. It could start way up. The forwards not defending to their strength. All right. So we ask you on now that the Yes Network and Joe Tolleson no longer carry the games. Now we're going to say sink, 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 sink. Well, now you're with me tonight, Joe. And so these are directions to sync, which I've also tweeted out so you can see it, or it will be tweeted out just before kickoff. And just you put your TV on, you get the game on, and when it gets to the kickoff, freeze it, pause it, whatever that is. Pause it, and then you have our stream on, the New York City FC Network, which is nycfc.com/radio, or maybe it's on your app, the NYCFC app, or maybe you have the TuneIn app. It's on one of those three sources. And then when the whistle blows and I say, we're underway, unpause it, man. Unpause it, and then you come with us.
And if you're trying to watch, tonight's game is through the CBS Sports Golazo network.
That's right, which is free.
Yeah,
free
CBS
tonight.
Sports Golazo is free if you go online. If you already have Paramount Plus because you have the Champions League or Serie A or something like that, it will be available there as well. And it's also streaming. But again, a chance on one of those two outlets. And if you're watching on your TV on Paramount Plus and you found the stream there, as Glenn said, and every once in a while during the match, we'll make sure we'll say, hey, if you're trying to sync your TV, right now the stadium clock, says 23:55, 56, 57, and you can look and see where you are and really see, do you need to pause us or do you need to pause your TV?
Well done. All right, so we're getting ready for our pregame commentary on the New York City FC Network, which starts at 6:45 Eastern. You see the starting lineup there. Matt Freese will get his first appearance for New York City, as will Tony Alfaro for New York City FC. They will play three at the back, and we'll see how it goes against a team that has not lost at home this year, FC Cincinnati, and New York City, a team that has not won on the road. Will something give? We're going to find out shortly. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to your accompanying us on the broadcast tonight. Good day, everybody.